And now, the survival show that once survived total chaos from a weekend-long government shutdown. In this episode, Jill Powell of Remnant K9 360 drops back by to share with us how to take care of your best friend should the world go sideways. You'll learn all about the seldomly discussed topic of food storage and medicine for dogs. Howdy and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 243. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Jill, welcome back to In the Rabbit Hole.
Hi, Aaron. Thank you for having me back on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, definitely. It's, we're going to talk about puppies, one of my favorite topics.
Mine too. Yep.
Yeah. So now, last time we left off with dog training, and that was great. And today, let's get into food and medicine for dogs. We often think of these things for ourselves and our two-legged counterparts, but not enough thought goes into prepping for our pups, I found. And I know that was even a hole in my own preps that I found early on. And it was funny, we were just talking a minute ago, it dawned on me because I was sitting around trying to figure out and come up with episode topics like way back in the very early days of In the Rabbit Hole. And I looked and went, oh my God, I've done all this stuff for myself and everything else. And we've gone through some extreme measures, and I've done nothing for the puppy dog. And so I think this is going to be a good episode to maybe help some people with some answers they've been struggling with, or help jar people awake to the fact that maybe they hadn't been prepping for their best friend.
Right. Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat when we started Remnant K9 360 and the dog training. Kind of that light bulb moment went on for me as well when I'm sitting here looking at our three dogs and really conscientiously thinking about how they could be an asset for us, during those crisis situations. And then I thought, oh my gosh, in our food stores, even in thinking about water, first aid, I hadn't really taken them into consideration. So I thought, oh, we really need to fix this. It's a hole that we had also in our prepping. So I think it's great that we're going to spend some time talking about that today, and hopefully help some folks fill in those gaps in their preparations as well, especially for their best friend, their puppy dogs.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with food. What is recommended for long-term food storage when it comes to dry kibble, say?
All right. For dry kibble, most of the research that I've done says the best way that you can store that dry dog food is right in the bag. So the manufacturer has done a really great job in packaging their product for it to last. So a lot of times you'll see on your dry dog food like a best by date or an expiration date. That date could be possibly several years out.
Oh, wow.
So the date on the back of the food bag means that the manufacturer will guarantee that optimum freshness and nutritional quality up to that date. It doesn't mean that the food is no longer good. It just means that it probably would be best if you use it by that date on the bag for, the optimal freshness and nutritional value. But it could still be good after that date. So that's kind of important to keep in mind. And so it's just really ideal to keep it in the bag itself, because once you open that bag, the oxidation process starts to occur at a pretty rapid pace. And so once you open that bag, some of the articles that I've seen, they really say it will not last much longer than 6 months. One article I even read 6 weeks. So that's kind of a huge gap there, 6 weeks to 6 months. I think 6 weeks is probably not the case, because most of us don't, maybe get through a bag of food that quickly. It just depends. Also, the manufacturer has made that bag to where it's able to breathe a little bit. Then this is really important because dry pet food, it contains moisture in the form of fats and oils. So if you were to say to open that bag, dump it into an airtight container and try to oxidize it yourself by, adding oxygen absorbers and the silica packet, it's not allowing for that necessary breathing, I guess, to take place. And so the food can go rancid. So if you're going to want to store it in something else, just take that unopened package, put it in a metal bin or put it in an airtight container to store it, but don't take it out of the bag itself. And then also make sure you store that in a dark, dry area that's kind of away from, the extreme temperature swings.
Mm-hmm. So that makes sense. And I guess with the container or the metal container, I mean, usually it comes, usually it's the form of those kind of galvanized aluminum or tin trash cans that look like the trash cans from like the 1960s and 70s. And I guess for that, is it really just about rodent control?
Yes, I would think so. Just in case you're having to store that out in a place where, some other animals or rodents could get a hold of it, that just adds that extra protection for the food itself.
We store ours in our pantry, and like we were talking about a few minutes ago, like I usually keep 1 to 2 extra bags of food on hand. We just leave them in the bag, and then whatever food we're using, we open the bag and pour that into one of the plastic cubes that have the big screw top on it.
Right.
So that's interesting to know as far as that those bags have actually been designed. And I guess that makes sense. Like if you're looking at feed stores and other places, they're usually buying in large bulk, and that stuff could be sitting there for a little while it waits to be sold off. So
probably in your pantry, you probably wouldn't even need to put it in, that extra bin, because again, hopefully you don't have rodents in your house, in your pantry.
In my pantry in particular,
So it's probably not necessary to do that. But also they recommend, even if you're not, like when you open your new bag of dog food that you're actually feeding your dog from, they recommend to not even dump that into another container. They recommend keeping it in the package opened in another container or just in the bag. Because again, I guess over time, the fats and the oils can build up on the inside of that plastic or metal storage container that you're using. That can, again, make the food go rancid or bad quicker. Unless, maybe after you finish a bag of food, before you dump the next bag in, you could wash it out. But I thought that was interesting too, because once I open a bag of food and I'm actually feeding it to my dogs, I've always dumped it into another bin. And, I have my little scoop, my measuring scoop and that kind of stuff. So they even recommend the current kibble that you're feeding your dog to keep it in the package itself.
That's really interesting. Now I need to change my own behavior.
Right. And I'm still actually doing the plastic bin thing. So I need to change my behavior. I'm sitting here, sharing this information with you guys, but we are creatures of habit. So I've got to change that habit.
Yeah. Wow. So that's interesting that stuff can last anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months. That's really impressive is the 6 months. I don't know what that says about any of the preservatives that are in the food that we're feeding our dogs, but.
Right.
So what about when it comes to canned food?
All right. So canned food, just like the date on the dry food bags, the date on that canned pet food, again, is just that date that the manufacturer says, will guarantee the optimal nutritional value up to that point. And a lot of times you'll see those dates, being from 2 to 5 years out. And then some people say that pet canned food can last up to 10 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's a long time.
Yeah.
Obviously. And I guess the advantage to canned food, at least for prepping purposes or preparedness purposes, is it's a lot less bulky. So it takes up a lot less space to store it. So, there's some advantages to that wet dog food as well. And also in times when water may be a problem or an issue, wet that dog food is going to have some water content in it, which may help the dog be less thirsty, where the dry kibble obviously doesn't have any type of water value in it. So, for example, for my family, we feed dry dog food at home, but we are now storing up canned dog food out at our property, which we kind of consider our bug out location because we don't have as much space out in that area. And so the canned wet food just kind of made sense for storage purposes since we don't have as much space to do that.
And that makes sense about the length of time. I mean, that's a bit like human canned food.
Right. To me, if it's going to last up, to 5 years, you're not constantly having to go out to your property or bug out location because we try to go at least once a month, but you're not constantly having to switch out the cans as much, if that makes sense. Where that dry food, you're going to really want to make sure that, you don't get into a situation and then you realize all your dog food's not good.
That makes sense. With the canned dog food, you don't have to be as aggressive about your copy canning habits as you would in your rotation through the food as you would with dry. So that makes perfect sense. We'll be back after this quick break. Listener, do you get at least $3 a month worth of value out of ITRH? You should see what we do for the Roving Horde Armada members. Check it out today by visiting itrh.net. Members get access to episodes a day early, access to monthly virtual and in-person meetups in some areas, an invitation to the secret ITRH Armada Facebook group so you can chat about survival all day long with like-minded people, access to every episode ever produced by ITRH. That's right, all the way back to the beginning, including one that was never aired. And those are just a few things you get with your membership when you sign up and become part of the ITRH Roving Horde by going to itrh.net. Again, that's itrh.net. What are some other options for long-term storage of pet food?
There also are many recipes for homemade dog food available on the internet. And that's actually in the dog world, that's a kind of a huge thing right now where people are feeding their dogs more like a holistic diet or even a raw diet. Because I guess really dog food, from what I understand, didn't show up. The manufactured dog food did not show up until about the 1930s. So up to that point in time, people were making their own pet food or they were just feeding their pets whatever they were eating at the time. And so one way that you could preserve that homemade pet food is by canning it. And one of the show links that we'll have up with this podcast, they actually do have some canning recipes on it and, give you options of canning your own pet food and doing that. Obviously, if you're canning your own pet food, you know what's going into it. So you can make sure those unhealthy additives and preservatives are not, in the food that a lot of times these commercial pet foods contain. But, I would caution against, make sure you know how to can and do that properly so that you're not ending up, feeding your dog something that maybe will give the dog problems. And then you're in a crisis situation and then you're trying to deal with, vomiting or diarrhea or those kind of things. So get some experience in that canning process and then, experiment with those canning recipes if that's something that you're interested in doing. And then another homemade option is just storing up on extra food goods that, dogs eat, like rice, meat, and some veggies. Usually, we're stocking those for ourselves. So just add intentionally more of those type of preparations to your food stores that are set aside for your pet or for your dog. And then finally, there's now freeze-dried pet foods coming on the market.
Oh, cool.
Now, that is going to be very expensive, just like the freeze-dried foods made for us. It's definitely not the most economical way to do things, but it's lightweight and it's obviously a viable option if that's something that somebody's interested in. The only thing with those is usually freeze-dried, the pet food comes in plastic bags. And so you're going to need to repackage them with those oxygen absorbers and the silica packets in a stronger container, an airtight plastic container for that long-term storage purpose. So unlike the dry dog food where you want that bag to do its work that the manufacturer has designed it to do, the freeze-dried food folks, I guess, didn't foresee that preppers and people, with preparedness in mind, would see this as a viable option and want to store it for years to come. So you'll need to take some extra steps if you decide to go that route.
Huh, that's interesting. Or I guess if somebody is really fancy and buys one of the home freeze drying things, they could also always go that route.
Do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of my goals this year is to learn how to can.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll start with the foods for us first and get that process figured out. And then maybe we'll try some of this pet food canning ourselves and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that'll be neat to hear about. Well, hey, let's move on to the medical section, and we'll make it simple. What are the 3 most common ailments in dogs?
All right. Well, with doing my preparation for this part of the podcast today, it was really kind of hard to narrow down what I really thought, people would want to hear about and to learn about. So I'm going to mention vomiting, diarrhea, and then worms, because I really tried to think, hey, if we're in a crisis situation and we no longer have access to our veterinarian and to vet care, and maybe the situations, that we're in are not completely optimal because things have been compromised, our everyday commodities that we have. An article that we'll mention again in the show notes is a great magazine that has like everything you're going to want to know probably about just about any ailment that you want to learn about. So with the vomiting and the diarrhea, I found that the treatments are very, very similar in nature. So if your dog starts to vomit or have diarrhea, you're going to want to fast the dog. So you're going to want to withhold food from them for at least 12 hours, if not 24 hours. Just kind of gives their GI tract some time to rest and recover. Once that time elapses, you're going to want to start feeding them a bland diet. So this bland diet is going to include like boiled chicken and rice, or boiled lean ground beef and rice. You'll do that for a few days, and then you can go back to reintroducing their regular food. And during this time, what's very important is you're also going to want to make sure they stay hydrated because dehydration could then become a concern as well. Mm-hmm. So you want to provide ice chips for them to lick on. And that's just so that they're not gulping a bunch of water down and then potentially throwing that water back up, which again doesn't help with the hydration piece. So they really recommend giving the dogs ice chips so they get the water, but they're not gulping it. And then you can reintroduce larger amounts of water as you kind of move through these different stages that I talked about. And then also remedies is you can actually give dogs Pepto-Bismol. Now, some people say they recommend the treatment. Other folks say they caution against it. So I'm going to say you need to talk to your vet. I want to emphasize with everything that I'm, talking about today, especially with the medical stuff, is, to have conversation with your veterinarian, get to know them, let them get to know your pet and, talk with them about these different types of, alternatives and situations. And a lot of times vets, if your dog is on medication, will give you a month's supply of medication that you can go fill and keep within your pet first aid kit, which we'll get to here in a little bit. Mm-hmm. So Pepto-Bismol is good for vomiting. Probiotics is good for both conditions. It just helps with the nausea, and it also promotes a healthy gut. A lot of people feed probiotics to their puppies every day, actually given daily. Ginger is good for vomiting. It's an antiemetic, has an antiemetic effect by blocking the serotonin receptors in the gut that causes the nausea. So ginger is a good thing to have on hand. And then slippery elm bark is for both. Well, and this is a herbal remedy that contains tannins that help reduce the inflammation in that GI tract. But they do not recommend that you do the slippery elm bark with pregnant dogs or those taking medications. So again, really having that conversation with your vet prior to a crisis is probably optimal. Oh, worms, because obviously in a survival situation or a crisis, your dogs may be getting into puddle that, they maybe not should be in, or there might be a occasion where they're going to pick up these worms. There are different types of worms: round worms, tapeworms, hookworms, whipworms. Again, in the show notes, I'm going to give you a great reference where this article shows you what the worms look like so you can kind of self-diagnose what kind of worms your dog has. But then they talk about these 13 foods to help eliminate worms. So I'm going to run through them real quick. Fermented vegetables. Thought that was very interesting. Coconut or raw goat milk kefir. Pumpkin seeds, grated carrots, watercress, green squash or fennel, cucumber, pineapple, papaya, pomegranate, garlic, apple cider vinegar, coconut oil, parsley, and bone broth. Thought that was very informative. Things that, you can get from the grocery store, have on hand for these types of situations. The other thing that I kind of ran across too was ear infections, I guess, are pretty common in dogs. All three of our dogs have very large, pointy, sticking up ears. So haven't really ever had ear problems, but that may be, something that folks may run into. And a lot of the things that I mentioned for worms, which is kind of crazy, like the apple cider vinegar and things like that, can be used in the ear treatment too. So a lot of times you can cross different types of ailments with some of these natural remedies.
That's good to know and really helpful, because like the less random stuff you have to store, the better.
Right. Eventually we do run out of room and you have to prioritize what you're wanting. So
and it's neat that there's that many different things that you could use. And I guess you match those to what kind of worm you're seeing that the animal gets. And man, once an animal gets worms, it's especially like heartworms or something, it's the deworming process is really serious. You don't want to ever have that lapse.
Well, and then you're also, if you really think about the situations that we're thinking about when, some of our when the modern conveniences aren't available and we're in this high stress situation and environment, not only are we under stress, but our pets are under stress as well, which can compromise, again, their immune system and how they deal with things as well. And I don't think a lot of times we don't think about that. Oh, they're just a dog. They are creatures. They feed off of our anxiety. They kind of feed off our mood. And so those high stress situations are going to put stress on them as well. So, possibly be prepared that they may just have, like the vomiting and diarrhea just because of the anxiety that's being produced at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some other items we should take into consideration when preparing our pets for an emergency situation? I know we just mentioned emergency kits or first aid kits a second ago. So.
Right. Well, I think this is really worth the Humane Society. And again, this will be in the show notes, but they have a great downloadable PDF, the information to make your own pet first aid kit, which I think is awesome. It's probably more economical than buying a pre-made pet first aid kit if you do it yourself. And then you're also able to personalize it with the items that your particular pet may need. Like I said, if your vet will give you that emergency prescription or supplies for medication that your personal pet may be on, you can add that to the kit and that it's there as well. So some other things too that you want to keep in mind for preparing your pet for an emergency is, we've mentioned water before, and I'm going to mention it again because water is so very important. So when you're storing water for your family, you're also going to want to take into consideration that you're going to need to supply water for your animal as well. So make sure that you store water for them. We've also talked about food. I think I mentioned it before, but the canned wet dog food does have some water content in it. So that could help, again, with, the water piece of that, keeping them hydrated, but make sure that whatever you choose to do food-wise, that you have that available and ready for them. Also mentioned this, but medications, if your dog isn't on any medications, talk to your vet. You are also going to want to have proof of ownership. This is, just in case for some reason during the natural disaster, we saw it, in Houston with Hurricane Harvey. Pets were rescued, but they were maybe separated from their families. So how are you going to prove that that's your animal if you're able to be reunited with them? So keep proof of ownership in a sealed, airtight container or a bag with that emergency kit or where you're going to store the things that you're going to take with you. And proof of recent vaccinations is probably important in case you find that you're having to maybe, go to an area, maybe you're not able to stay in your home, you can't get to your bug out location. You're going to want to, people are going to want to know that your dog is safe to be around or have been vaccinated. So again, keep those records up to date and with your proof of ownership. Then an emergency help list. Who are some folks maybe along the way that could help you with your pet as you're fleeing from that emergency situation? Then leashes or pet carriers. You're going to obviously want to make sure your dog stays with you. And they're, again, like we mentioned, they're going to be stressed out, lots of maybe chaos going on, things happening. So you're going to want to make sure that you're not separated from them. And one of the best ways to do that is to keep them leashed or in a pet carrier. Now, my 3 dogs are rather large, so I can't imagine transporting them other than if I was able to transport them in my car, in that, in a pet carrier. And that's how I transport them normally. I have permanent crates in our vehicle. So that would be ideal if we were able to, get away from the situation in a vehicle, that they would feel very comfortable doing that because that's how they're used to traveling. But leashes for sure. And then ID tags. And I know a lot of places now that require, like we live here in San Antonio, and they require that your dog be microchipped. But, if things happen where our electronic type of technology is not working, you're not going to be able to scan that microchip to figure out, who the dog belongs to. So I always keep a collar and ID on my dogs as well. So both forms of kind of identification for them. Then we talked about the first aid kit that's specifically packed for a pet in mind. And then some creature comforts, like we talked about before. They're going to be stressed too. So a blanket or a toy or something that has their smell on it that's familiar to them is really important to make sure you pack as well. And something that really helps dogs with anxiety is lavender oil. You can just put a small amount of lavender oil, just kind of like right under their nose, or like if they're in a crate or something, you can just rub the oil on like the gate or the front of the carrier, and it helps calm them and soothe them. And then also there's things called they're called thunder shirts. I call it thunder blanket, but I think it's a thunder shirt.
Yeah.
But it's actually, a shirt that you wrap around the dog that helps with that anxiety as well. And then finally, home, you can purchase stickers that say you have pets inside. So maybe your house is on fire, God forbid, or there's some reason why you're not able to get into your home, and, rescue or responders are still available to come help you. Then they can see that sticker and know that there may be pets that need to be rescued as well.
Yeah, that's good. I had forgotten about those stickers because remember there was a big push for that in the 80s for stickers for that there were kids in the house and stickers that there were pets in the house, and I'd completely forgotten about that until you just mentioned it.
Right. So that's important.
Well, very cool. So tell us what's going on over at Remnant K9 360 these days. Last we left off, you were working on your new patrol package as the pup was maturing into that and of the appropriate age to film and not forcing them ahead. How's that going?
It's going really well. We got another video out, video 4, which is controlling your perimeter. So doing some scout work. So really happy with that latest video. So now we're moving on to video 5, which I'm super excited about because it's going to take some of these skills that we've been teaching folks in the first 4 videos and putting them into practical scenarios. So it's a scenario-based video.
Oh, neat.
So we'll be taking film at our own home with like a home invader and employing the dog to work for us. In that situation, we're going to go out to our property as well, have some, decoys, people approach us that shouldn't be there and work through some scenarios on our property. So I'm really excited about that because I think that video will put, you work on these individual skills and commands. But for me, it's really good to run the drills and see how it's going to work in a real life situation. Again, as a handler, do you have the wherewithal to say, okay, I need my dog to do this and I need to be here? And what does that mean if, the intruders move this way? And just to strategically think through that. So I'm really excited about that. And then video 6, we'll be doing searches in a building, which I think is obviously very important if you're having to move your family, whether you're able to move them via vehicle or if you're having to move, via foot. Being able, if you're having to secure safe shelter for yourself and your family along the way, and how the dog can help you clear a building in that sense to make sure there's not any threats there. So we're really excited about those, and those should be coming out here probably, I would say my goal would be no later than March 1st. So.
Oh, very cool. And that's some exciting stuff. Well, very cool. And for people who maybe missed the last episode we did together, what do y'all do over there at Remnant K9 360?
Well, we're an online canine training academy, and we specifically trying to reach those in the preparedness community to help them train their canine to become an asset in times of crisis, where normal emergency services are maybe not available because they are either too busy helping other folks, or maybe it's, the crisis has gone on long enough to where they're home taking care of their own. So we offer 3 packages, specific obedience, which it lays the groundwork for our other 2 packages, which is scent detection and patrol. Obedience, we have found that specific obedience package has been really popular because without a dog that doesn't know those basic commands and is not going to respond to you at that foundational level, it's really hard to, do some more of the advanced training. So, but we do offer the scent detection and the patrol packages as well. Scent detection, you can use it for all different sorts of scent classes. The videos kind of lean towards explosives. That's what our dog is imprinted on. But you can choose a scent class of your choice. And then, the patrol obviously is for that perimeter control and even possibly diffusing a situation so you don't have to use any more deadly force or, more aggressive force than just the presence of the dog itself.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. So, and you've also got a free mini course that people can grab on your website, correct?
Yes. That's our free video lesson. So we'd love for people to check that out. And that gives them a taste for the type of quality of video that we offer and how in-depth the training is as well. So when you get the video, there should be a downloadable PDF with the actual text that's on the video itself. And so when you purchase a package, not only do you get the video lesson, you get a downloadable PDF, which gives you all the training that was presented in the video in a written form. And then we also offer an audio only option as well. So you've got a lot of opportunities to learn the material in your learning style.
Tell us your website real quick, because it's Remanent and then K9 is spelled out, isn't it?
Yes. So Remnant K9, CANINE 360.com. So Remnant K9 360.com. And we'd also love for you to check us out on YouTube. And on that channel, I've begun making some really short, like 2-minute videos with some basic training concepts. So one of the videos shows me getting the dogs to wait for dinner time, which is great impulse control. So just cool little training tips that you can do that take just a few minutes each day, and you'll see great results in your puppy dog and your interaction with them and the commands that you can teach them.
Well, great stuff. Jill, thank you again so much for being on the show. Tell us the website address one more time.
It's remnantk9360.com.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you, Aaron.
Show notes, links to everything from this episode and other resources can be found by going to intherabbithole.com/E243. Support the show and get I2RH Roving Horde Armada members-only benefits. Go to I2RH.net to become part of the Roving Horde Armada. Twice a month, members get private virtual hangs. These are a chance to hang out with me and other like-minded everyday preppers and discuss whatever's on your mind, the things you just can't talk about with anybody else. You also get access to the on-demand bug-out bag class, special prepper spreadsheets, access to the secret I2RH Armada Facebook group. That's just to name a few things you get when you go to I2RH.net to become part of the Roving Horde Armada. Again, that's I2RH.net to find out about the exclusive members-only benefits. With that, we wrap up episode number 243 from the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.